Boston Bruins 2010 Eastern Conference Semifinals versus Flyers. The 2010 Bruins collapse wasn't just bad, it was historic. Boston had a 3-0 series lead against the Flyers and were absolutely rolling. They outscored Philly 17-9 in the first 3 games and looked like a team on a mission. The Flyers were banged up, missing key players, and no NHL team had come back from a 3-0 deficit in 35 years. But Game 4 went to overtime, and the Flyers stayed alive with a gritty win. Game 5, all Philly. Game 6, another comeback win. Suddenly, Game 7 was in Boston, and the Bruins jumped out to a 3-0 lead in the first period. The series felt over. Then, everything unraveled. JVR made it 3-1, then Hartnell, then Briere. By the third, the game was tied. With just over 7 minutes left, a Bruins too-many-men penalty opened the door. Simon Gagner scored on the power play. Flyers 4, Bruins 3. Boston had blown a 3-0 series lead and a 3-0 Game 7 lead at home. It remains the gold standard for NHL chokes. San Jose Sharks 2014 First Round versus Kings. The 2014 Sharks looked like killers. They opened their series against the defending champion Los Angeles Kings with 3 straight wins, scoring 17 goals across games 1 to 3 and absolutely dismantling Jonathan Quick. It wasn't just a lead, it was a statement. They had 3 chances to close out the series, and they blew all of them. Game 4, the Kings punched back with a 6-3 win. Game 5, the Sharks were shut out. Game 6, a rout. By the time Game 7 hit, momentum was gone. On home ice, San Jose folded, a 5-1 loss in front of stunned fans. Over the final 4 games, they were outscored 18-5, a collapse in every sense. Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Logan Couture. This was the core built to win. But instead, they became the 4th team in NHL history to blow a 3-0 series lead, and the only one to do it against a defending Cup champion that they just dominated. The Kings, they rode the comeback all the way to the Stanley Cup. The Sharks, they entered a decade-long identity crisis. Toronto Maple Leafs 2013 First Round Game 7 versus Bruins. The Leafs hadn't made the playoffs in 9 years, but here they were. Game 7, up 4-1 over Boston in the 3rd period. 10 minutes to go. Thousands of fans partying outside the ACC. It felt like a new era, but it wasn't. In just 10 minutes, the Bruins did the impossible. They scored 2 goals in 31 seconds to make it 4-3. With 51 seconds left, Patrice Bergeron tied it. In overtime, it was Bergeron again, 5-4. Bruins win. Toronto's collapse is etched into hockey lore. Not just because they lost, but because of how sudden, shocking, and soul-crushing it was. It's a Game 7 that every Leafs fan remembers, and every rival fan brings up. Edmonton Oilers 2006 Stanley Cup Final. The Oilers were the Cinderella story of 2006, an 8th seed that knocked off Detroit, San Jose, and Anaheim, and entered the Stanley Cup Final with all the momentum in the world. In Game 1 against Carolina, they were up 3-0. Then came the moment that changed everything. Dwayne Rollison, their MVP goaltender, went down with a knee injury. Ty Conklin replaced him and made a catastrophic mistake behind the net in the final minute, gifting Carolina the game winner. The Oilers never fully recovered. They battled hard and forced Game 7, but in the biggest game of the year, without their star goalie, they fell short, losing 3-1. They came 1 win away from a Miracle Cup run, and yet all fans remember is what could have been. Vancouver Canucks 2011 Stanley Cup Final versus Bruins. The Canucks were built for this. President's Trophy winners, loaded top to bottom. The Sedin twins, Kessler, Luongo, a dominant power play, and they took a 2-0 lead in the final. Then, Boston broke them. The Bruins outscored Vancouver 21-4 over the final 5 games. In Boston, the Canucks were humiliated. At home, they eked out wins, but Game 7, on their own ice, was supposed to be their moment. Instead, it was a disaster. Luongo was shaky. The Bruins smothered them. 4-0. No cup, no glory. Just riots in the streets, and a haunting reminder that regular season dominance doesn't guarantee anything in June. Tampa Bay Lightning 2019 First Round versus Blue Jackets. The 2018-19 Lightning were a juggernaut. They tied the NHL record for most wins in a season, 62, and featured a loaded roster. Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, Hedman, Vasilevsky. They had the league MVP, the Vezina favorite, and the President's Trophy locked up with weeks left in the season. Then came the playoffs. They faced the 8th-seeded Blue Jackets, a team that barely squeaked in. In Game 1, Tampa jumped to a 3-0 lead after the first period, and then they never led again. Columbus stormed back to win Game 1. then dismantled Tampa in the next 3, a sweep. Kucherov was suspended for a dirty hit. Hedman was injured. Stamkos invisible. The most dominant regular season team in a generation didn't win a single game. It wasn't just a choke. It was a collapse that rewrote what we thought was possible. No President's Trophy team had ever been swept in round 1 until this one. Ottawa Senators 2003 Eastern Conference Final Game 7 versus Devils. 2003 was supposed to be Ottawa's year. They finished first in the NHL with 113 points. Daniel Alfredsson guaranteed a cup. They had the league's best offense, a mobile defense, and a red-hot goalie in Patrick Lalonde. After a 3-1 series hole against New Jersey, they battled back to force Game 7 in Ottawa. The city was electric. They were down 2-1 late and tied it with under 3 minutes to go. The roof almost blew off the Coral Center. Then came the dagger. Jeff Friesen took a loose puck in front and buried the game winner with 2:14 left. The Sens were done. Another Canadian team, another heartbreak. They wouldn't reach that close to the cup again until 2007. And even then, it ended in more pain. Toronto Maple Leafs, 2021, first round versus Canadiens. The Leafs were division champs. They had a superstar core: Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares. Carey Price was struggling. The Habs barely made the playoffs, and Montreal had the worst odds of any Canadian team. Toronto took a 3-1 series lead and looked poised to win their first playoff series since 2004. Then, Game 5 went to overtime. Montreal won. Then Game 6, another OT, another Habs win. Game 7 was in Toronto. But the Leafs never showed up. A 3-1 series lead vanished in smoke as Carey Price played like a god and the Leafs offense vanished. Matthews scored just once. Marner, 0. Tavares was out with injury, and the curse stayed alive. St. Louis Blues, 2000. First round versus Sharks. They were the best team in the league. President's Trophy winners. Balanced, deep, experienced. Chris Pronger won both the Norris and the Hart. Pavel Demitra, Al McInnes, Roman Turek in net. This was the team. Then they ran into the 8th-seeded Sharks. San Jose bullied them early and took a 3-1 series lead. The Blues fought back and forced Game 7 at home. Then, disaster. Midway through the first period, Owen Nolan picked up a loose puck and, from center ice, fired it on goal. It beat Turek clean. One of the most humiliating goals in playoff history. The Sharks won 3-1, sending the Blues home in disgrace. A 114-point season, gone. Montreal Canadiens, 2019, collapse after 96% playoff odds. By mid-February 2019, the Canadiens were sitting pretty. They had a 96% chance to make the playoffs. Carey Price was finally healthy. Shea Weber was anchoring the blue line. Max Domi was having a breakout year. The rebuild looked ahead of schedule. Then, the bottom fell out. Montreal lost 12 of their final 19 games. They couldn't score. The power play dried up. Carey Price was average, and teams like Carolina and Columbus, who had once been behind them, surged ahead. Montreal finished with 96 points and missed the playoffs by 2. It was the best non-playoff record in a decade, and one of the most mathematically improbable chokes of the salary cap era. New York Rangers, 2015, Eastern Conference Final Game 7 versus Lightning. The Rangers had gone to the Cup final the year before. This time, they were better. President's Trophy winners, Henrik Lundqvist playing at a Vezina level, a dominant blue line. Offense by committee. They clawed back from a 3-1 deficit against Washington in round 2. They pushed the Lightning to Game 7 at Madison Square Garden, but when it mattered most, they flatlined. The Lightning shut them out. 2-0. The Rangers barely tested Ben Bishop. No urgency, no push. A cup window that had been wide open for years was suddenly shut. It was Lundqvist's last real shot, and it ended in silence. Detroit Red Wings, a 1996 Western Conference Final versus Avalanche. The Red Wings were unstoppable in 1996. They set the NHL record for regular season wins with 62. Steve Yzerman, Sergei Fedorov, Nick Lidstrom, and behind them, a stone wall named Chris Osgood. They bulldozed through the first 2 rounds and reached the conference final against Colorado, a team they outclassed on paper. But Colorado had something Detroit didn't: Patrick Waugh in net, and Claude Lemieux with bad intentions. The Avalanche stole Game 1 in Detroit, then Game 2. Roy shut the door while Lemieux's infamous hit on Chris Draper lit a powder keg. The Wings never recovered, mentally or physically. They lost in 6, including a 4-1 blowout in the final game. 62 wins, no cup, and a rivalry that would explode into bloodshed for years. Philadelphia Flyers, 2002 Eastern Conference First Round versus Senators. The 2002 Flyers were built to win, a powerhouse team led by Jeremy Roenick, Mark Recchi, and John LeClair. They had Roman Sechmanek, who finished the season with a 2.05 GAA. The expectation? Cup or bust. Then they ran into the Senators and completely disappeared. The Flyers scored just 2 goals in the entire 5-game series. Both came in Game 2. They were shut out in Games 1, 3, 4, and 5. A historic offensive drought. Ottawa embarrassed them. The Flyers were booed off their own ice. Head coach Bill Barber was fired shortly after. It was one of the most lifeless, inexplicable collapses by a contending team in modern NHL history. San Jose Sharks, 2002 Western Conference Semifinals versus Avalanche. San Jose had built momentum for years, and in 2002, it looked like they were ready to break through. They took a 3-2 series lead over the defending Cup champs, the Colorado Avalanche, and had 2 chances to close it out. Then came Patrick Waugh again. In Game 6, Waugh posted a shutout, his 22nd in the playoffs. In Game 7, Colorado clamped down. The Sharks couldn't score when it mattered, and Peter Forsberg sealed the deal. San Jose once again collapsed under pressure. Their Cup dreams would have to wait again. Washington Capitals, 2010 First Round versus Canadiens. The Capitals were unstoppable in 2010. President's Trophy winners with 121 points, led by peak Alexander Ovechkin. Their offense was historic. 318 goals. They scored for fun. They drew the 8th-seeded Canadiens, a team that barely made the playoffs. Washington jumped out to a 3-1 series lead. The finish line was in sight. Then came Jaroslav Halak. Halak delivered one of the greatest goaltending performances in playoff history. He stopped 37 of 38 in Game 5, then 53 of 54 in Game 6. In Game 7, the Habs shut the Caps out through 2 periods and held on for a stunning 2-1 win. Washington, the league's best team, was eliminated by an 8 seed and a hot goalie. A decade of regular season dominance, playoff failure, was officially born. Dallas Stars, 2006 First Round versus Avalanche. Dallas had 112 points, a high-powered offense, a healthy Marty Turco. A first-round matchup with the declining Avalanche team. Easy money on paper. Instead, Colorado wrecked them. The Stars lost Game 1 in overtime, then Game 2 in double overtime, then got blown out in Game 5 at home. Turco's playoff issues came roaring to the surface, a .848 save percentage over the series. The Stars' elite defense fell apart. Joe Sakic looked young again. Dallas fans expected a deep run. Instead, they got 5 games of embarrassment. Calgary Flames, 2004 Stanley Cup Final Game 6. The Flames were inches away from glory, up 3-2 in the series against Tampa Bay. Game 6 was in Calgary. A win meant lifting the Stanley Cup on home ice. Late in the third, with the score tied, Martin Jelena redirected a puck toward the net. It looked in. The building erupted, but there was no goal. The whistle never blew. Replay wasn't conclusive. The Flames never scored again. Tampa won Game 6 in double OT, then finished the job in Game 7. Calgary had been 1 inch, 1 frame, away from the cup. That non-call is still argued about today. New York Islanders, 1993 Wales Conference Final versus Canadiens. After upsetting the 2-time defending champion Penguins, the Isles were the Cinderella team of 1993, but in the conference final, they ran into Montreal and completely ran out of steam. Game 1, a 4-1 loss. Game 2, shutout. The Canadiens crushed them in 5 games. Pierre Turgeon was injured, and the Isles never found their spark. Patrick Waugh was unbeatable. The Isles' magical run ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. They wouldn't reach the conference final again for 27 years. Florida Panthers, 2023 Stanley Cup Final versus Golden Knights. Florida was the hottest team in hockey. They clawed into the playoffs as the last seed, then took out Boston, Toronto, and Carolina. Matthew Tkachuk was unstoppable. Sergei Bobrovsky was playing like 2012 Jonathan Quick. Then came Vegas. The Golden Knights steamrolled them. Game 2, 7-2 blowout. Game 5, 9-3 humiliation. Tkachuk was injured. Bobrovsky was human. Vegas exposed every weakness. The Panthers had been the giant slayers, but in the final, they were the ones slaughtered. After one of the greatest underdog runs in years, they were flattened on the sport's biggest stage. But the story didn't end there. In 2024 and 2025, Florida rewrote their legacy.